So Ryan, first podcast ever, episode 1. Yeah, it's not episode 0. I don't think that makes sense, but it's episode 1. We're here in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. Behind you, sunshine, palm trees, and a FedEx truck. So
I don't get to see any of that.
Right. You just stare at me and some Spanish moss behind me. But yeah, we're here at the College of Charleston, who is really awesome of having us, of hosting us, of providing this great studio, the equipment, and making this happen. So like I said, episode 1, the Ingenics Transformative Talks. We're talking here today about a very special topic. I think both of us really like this. It's kind of a favorite topic of ours. It's generally speaking about factory planning. And to be a little bit more precise, it's unifying factory planning, supply chain planning, and logistics, and why these things have to go together. And we'll get into the weeds of this, into the details. We'll get a little nerdy here today. So this is not a in-your-face presentation. This is really an exchange of our experience from the last few years, from exciting projects, from projects that went terribly wrong, and is really supposed to be a fun thing to watch and to listen to, and something to learn that you can take from this. So maybe we'll start with just a quick introduction. Ryan, who are you and why are you here today?
So my name is Ryan Lockaby. I'm the Director of Intralogistics Planning at Ingenics. What that basically means is anything that has to do with physical logistics, in-house logistics in a factory plan. I'm the right-hand man. I'm the first person to kind of give some feedback or steer other people, anything like that. So I really appreciate you having me here today.
Right. And Ryan and me, we go way back. I thought about this on the way when we drove here. I think we started working together in 2019.
2019, yep.
At one of our customers. First I trained him, then he trained me, and then probably we did this back and forth a few times again. So we've been 4 or 5 years now almost. Yeah. So we've done a good bit of work and adventures together. So and that's also what we want to share today. Maybe a sentence about myself. My name is Samuel. I'm one of the partners at Ingenics. My background is really logistics, warehouse, and factory planning. That's my passion. That gets me excited. Every time, we get to work on these things, I'm like, all right, let's do it. Let's travel, let's talk, let's work. So it's a passion project for me. Before we get into the topic, so I touched on it already a little bit. Who are we trying to reach today? Who are we trying to talk to here?
Anyone that wants to listen.
That's right.
Technical people, project managers, you're thinking about a new factory, you're thinking about a factory expansion. You don't necessarily know if you've got the right amount of people in doing the right roles, thinking about all the different topics. It's just a casual listen for those kinds of people to be able to say, I didn't think about how supply chain affects my factory. I didn't think about how logistics affects my factory. So just anyone in that sort of realm.
Exactly. And like I said, it's also, for engineers, for planners, for students, for everyone who just wants to learn about this subject to, get some experience, some lessons learned. Yeah, I mean, we hear this, you can't really replace experience, which is true. But you can obviously, when you listen to what more senior people, say and talk and try to share, if you actually listen, then that gives you a great advantage. So that's also why we're doing this here today. So let's jump into the first topic, connecting the dots. Yeah, the overall topic is factory planning, and now we're talking about supply chain. Like, how is that even connected? Like, why do we put these two things in a bowl and act now yet that, you need to do this together? Maybe shed some light on that.
Sure thing. So, supply chain is very important for factory planning. You've got different things going on. How is your material getting to your factory? How is it being stored on site? How is it getting into the walls of your factory? So you've got to plan where your dock doors are. You've got to plan where your truck gate is, where your trailer yards are. If you've got material in the trailer yards, you got to decide how much am I storing in the building? So either do I need a warehouse? Is it attached? How big does it need to be? If you're going to have staging near those dock doors, how all of that looks is all connected to your factory planning.
But generally speaking, you always have that. The things you mentioned, every manufacturing factory has that. Where are the variations? Like, where do different scenarios come into play, and where do input factors change the output? What's really the big topic you need to look at?
Well, different supply chains from different OEMs. For example, one OEM that we're very familiar with is very big on the just-in-time, just-in-sequence policy. So there's not nearly as much volume per car coming into the facility and that needs to be stored in a warehouse facility. On the flip side, there's another OEM that we are familiar with that almost has no just-in-time, just-in-sequence delivery. You've got to plan everything in a warehouse, and the way that you handle that is vastly different. You need to have a lot more dock doors and a lot more trailers coming through and intermingling with your assembly when you have more just-in-time. But if it's more on the warehouse side, then you can have more concentrated flows only to one side of your factory, so to speak.
Right. So then essentially that means your supply concept, your supply base, where your suppliers are, how they're shipping, these things.
All of that's relevant.
Shape your factory essentially.
Right.
Okay. Got it. I mean, for the sake of this podcast, I got it. So yeah, maybe we talk about an example where this was done not properly, or let's say where it wasn't fully considered, where it wasn't fully thought through. What was missed, and what was then the impact down the line?
So one example we have is an OEM manufacturer on the west side of the U.S. There's not a lot of suppliers near them, so everything kind of had to be metered in by a warehouse, but they also didn't have a warehouse on site. Their warehouse was, we'll say, a good ways away. You had to travel the interstate to get to the main manufacturing facility. And so there was a lot of problems where on the assembly line, if there's an issue, warehouse made a mistake, the response time is, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, maybe even more because you have to handle it within the warehouse. So all of that delay time could potentially be line downtime. And that's something, if you didn't plan with the logistics in mind, the logistics needs to be close. It needs to be ready to make a response and get that fixed. Then you may have a lot of downtime, a lot of waiting.
Right. But then was the issue that the suppliers were just too far away, or was the issue the warehouse being too far away? Like, how could this situation, how could it have been fixed?
I will say the answer is one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The suppliers being too far away means you need to have a close warehouse. The warehouse being too far away means you need to have close suppliers. It's a give and take. They're one and the same in terms of how you plan it.
Right.
So with you having the suppliers far, it's not ideal. But I think that was the hand that they were kind of dealt, so they had to deal with that. Because of that, you need to have a very robust warehouse that can handle not only the response time, but also a lot of storage, because you want to have more days on hand. You want to have more ability to have the supply chain robust enough for the suppliers that are far away.
Right. So then, there's different options that from the planning side, from laying out your factory that you can do. You can have an external warehouse, you can have an attached warehouse too. But what's important is kind of regardless of how your supply chain is, where your parts are coming from, it needs to be a clean planning when it comes to premises. Yeah, how many days do I need to store? If it's next door, a day or two is enough. If it's 10 hours, 15 hours, or maybe even, a different continent, you need to store more. So that needs to be then considered in your planning phase, in your design phase. Typically results in you need more space, right?
Right.
If that doesn't happen, or if that only happens halfway, or if you don't really, play with the different factors that you have and the different variants, then you might have a problem. Let's talk about the just in sequence concept. the more established, we're talking automotive at the moment, the automotive OEMs, they like just in sequence because the parts go straight to the line, they bypass the warehouse, they come in the right order. It's an efficient, fast, lean process. But it takes time until your supplier base is ready, until the process runs. So the newer OEMs, or maybe even suppliers that don't have that volume, they don't have that luxury.
Right.
What would be an alternative logistics setup where you could kind of create your own gist, and how would that look like?
So I'll say there's a few different ways you could do that. I'll say the most tried and true would be to have your just in sequence commodities be done by the warehouse, where you've got the warehouse, you store the material, and it comes into another cell, a sequencing cell, where they're taking all the parts and they know what cars are coming down the line, what needs what. They can sequence it there and send it over to the assembly line. Another thing that they could do is to have an offsite sequencing center or a module center, where you can have either you, the OEM, run it. You could have a 3PL run it. You could have even your suppliers run it. And what it is each individual supplier that would have a sequenced commodity, if they're too far away, they can have it there at the module center, and they could store the material that they need to store and then resequence it there when they know the call-offs at the line, and then put it on a trailer, ship it across the road, and then it's sequence ready to go for the line.
Right. So that's kind of a way of cheating kind of your supply chain in a way. You can't always create the suppliers next door or in your state or things like that. But there are tools, there are methods, there's concepts and processes you can put into place to still have that lean, efficient setup, on your line, without having everything full with boxes and parts and logistics. And it's just lots of different puzzle pieces that need to be put together. It's a combination of strategy, of also money, like how much do you want to invest initially, or do you want to keep it low invest first? So there's lots of different things. But I think we got an idea of how supply chain and logistics impacts the factory. We'll circle back to that in a little bit, but I think that kind of answers the why are we throwing this together, right? It's not because
it's
just
because I like logistics.
That's right. Yeah, we both like logistics. We're like factory planning. Let's spice it up a little bit. That's right. Because we want to participate. That's why we make such a big deal of it. All right. Second topic. Let's talk a little bit about benchmarking. So one of the cool things about working, not just Ingenics, but working as a consulting company or an external company in general, is that you see a lot of different customers, factories. You just, through your time, in average, probably spend every year 5 to 10 projects, something like that, with maybe around 5 different customers. So you just see a lot, you collect a lot, best practices, worst practices, things like that. So how are we, when it comes to factory planning, how can we use this knowledge and not just as an, hey, I've seen this and I've seen that. How do we, in a structured and a methodical way, how can we use this when it comes to the design, the layout, the size of a factory?
Well, we got a lot of input data. So if we know factory X makes 200,000 SUVs a year, we can then say, is it doing well? Is it doing it on 1 shift, 2 shift, 3 shift? What does their supply chain look like? What does their vertical integration look like? And then we can kind of say, we've got that data for a different factory, for a competitive factory. So we can say, you're going to make 300,000. Well, if you've got the same supply chain, your warehouse shouldn't be smaller, unless you're doing a module sequencing center or something like that. But so we can kind of almost grid out how each factory is looking in terms of like the assembly, the paint, the warehousing, whatever you've got relative to your manufacturing process. We can look at that and say, well, you are planning this. All your competitors are way undersized compared to you, way oversized, however it is. and then be able to present that back to the OEM.
Right. So it's a very KPI driven approach. You run different KPIs. Simple one would be size of your warehouse.
Yeah.
1 million square foot. And then you compare it to the volume, vertical integration, complexity, things like that, and you kind of normalize that value, maybe square foot per product or something else.
Yeah, and actually, so on top of being able to just compare with other OEMs, we've actually got a tool here where it takes about 3 minutes. It's, do you know how many cubic meters or cubic whatever, we can convert,
right?
That you're going to supply per vehicle, per whatever you're making? And do you know how many days or how many whatever you're storing in the warehouse? So let's say you're going to make 10 cubic meters in the warehouse per car, and I want to store 1,000 cars. Those two components alone can get you very close on what the overall size of a warehouse needs to be.
Yep.
So there's some more things, like, is it attached? How much sequencing am I doing? Those sorts of things.
Yep.
But it's a very good starting point.
Yeah, I mean, this topic is one of the things that still blows my mind. And we've done this a few times, right? Sometimes you have projects where the data you get is just either there is no data or it's very, very rough data. Right. Sometimes there's no product defined. There's a rough, like, it's going to be a car, SUV, premium, that many variants, and it's really just very, very rough on the input. And then it's like, okay, and now we need to get an idea of how we set up the factory. And so maybe explain there a little bit again. So how do we go from this product that doesn't even exist yet to something that's close to what we're probably going to have in the end?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of, we'll say benchmark, a lot of knowledge of what we'll keep in the automotive industry of what size a medium, mid-size SUV should be, what size a compact car should be, in terms of how much supply volume we're doing. If they have any idea on how much of that is needing to go through the warehouse, we can create an idea of, well, if it's coming from, say, the US, we should have X amount of days, but if it's coming from Europe, we should have Z amount of days.
Yeah.
And then turn that into the warehouse concept from that. I will say, we did these sorts of things for a past OEM, and I had even the finance team challenging me on it, like saying, how in the world did you come up with this? Yeah. We don't have a concept. How did you come up with something? And I said, it's this with our benchmarks, you know, I need X amount of space, and I would show it looks like this,
right?
And how each block would fall within that space.
Yeah. One of my favorite topics, because it's also, just to be brutally honest, it doesn't take us weeks to do this. This can be done in a few hours. And when you compare your initial concept or your initial draft with then the final, maybe 6 months later, you get the data and you do the detailed bottom-up plan, and then you can prove everything and it's not over the thumb anymore. Then you're like, wait a minute, this is close to what we had already 6 months ago, and we had nothing.
Right.
So I think one of the messages here is that with very little information, with very little knowledge, we don't need to be an expert on the product or the company or things like that. You can do a very, very good factory layout, factory design, and then of course you still have to fine tune it and bring it to the final stage. But it's in a short period of time you can get to a very good state.
I was in an internal training not too long ago, and then we brought up the topic of 20% of your efforts take 80% of the time, and 80% of your time, or 80% of your efforts take 20% of the time.
Yep.
And I unmuted. I joked that I'm very good at doing the 20% of the work to get 80% of the results, and everyone laughed, but that's me.
Yeah.
I am give me as little as you can.
Yep.
I'll get you very close, and then we'll take it from there.
Right, and it's often some of the concerns or objections, like, we're not ready yet, we don't have data yet, we can't work with external with us, with whoever, because we're not there yet. I'm like, well, give it a shot. We can, it's surprising what you can do, and it's So that's we could probably talk about this for hours, but
I was just gonna say, oftentimes by the point that you believe you are ready, it's too late.
Right. Yep.
The factory is already designed, and you say, well, here's the box.
Yep. Then you wait too long, and this is probably, now that we talk about it, a good topic for an episode. I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4, is delays and kind of the timeline approach of factory planning, how you can create restrictions that later you don't get out of anymore. How you, in a very early phase, you can, in blunt words, mess things up that you have to deal with then five years down the road and can't really fix it, or you have to spend 10 million to do it. So, but that's another topic. So since the two of us are, logistics nerds, especially you, let's talk a little bit more about logistics when it comes to the factory design. We talk about the supply chain, where suppliers are, how much you need to store, just in sequence, no just in sequence. But now if we talk about intralogistics, so inside the building, what different options, scenarios, technologies are there, and how are they, once again, affecting your factory?
Okay. So I'll say the first question, how much are you sequencing? How much are you bringing on site? How much are you going through the warehouse? From there, the question is, where is your warehouse? Is it attached, where we can just take a tugger from one spot to another, or maybe an AGV or an AMR, anything autonomous? Or is it detached and we have to have either conveyors if it's still close, or trailers and trucks if it's like over the road? Right.
I'll throw you a curveball, Ryan. With let's see if you're ready for that. So attached warehouse versus detached warehouse. Let's talk again, large scale automotive, 40, 50, 60 jobs an hour, something like that. So really volume. What would you say? Attached or detached?
I want attached.
You want attached?
I want attached.
Why?
So thinking about it like this, if your material is in a detached warehouse, it comes in on a trailer, you unload it, you store it in a warehouse, you load it on a trailer, you drive the trailer, you unload a trailer. An attached warehouse, you unload a trailer, you store it, you then send it to the line. It's just so much more streamlined for those sorts of things. Now, I get...
What disadvantages would I throw at you?
I get that, there's less... you've got more interlocks. You have less ability to expand production one way versus another. Also, if you have got a detached warehouse, the warehouse can be the shape you want it to be, rather than maybe fit in a corner, which, with early factory planning, hopefully wouldn't happen.
Happens a lot. It's always in the corner somewhere where you can't grow.
And there's also the potential, if you don't want to staff your warehouse yourself, it's a lot easier to have your offsite warehouse be a third-party logistics, a 3PL, rather than on-site. You can do it on site as well, but it just seems a lot cleaner from our experience, where the offsite has the 3PL and the on-site has your OEM personnel working there.
Yeah, there's definitely different concepts, pros and cons, and that's, it's probably not always the attached. Sometimes it's the detached. It depends on what you're dealing with. Is it a greenfield? Is it a brownfield? The offsite warehouse also has advantages, where with one of our customers we've seen, or we've actually implemented a concept where we use this as a metering facility more in a just-in-time concept. So They stored all the inventory, everything was in one central location, and then from there they kind of, we had different outbound streams and created just-in-time outbound streams to the factory. So they removed all the stock from the factory, and it was really just there. So, but this is also very sophisticated setup that's not easy to operate. So, let's not go down that rabbit hole too much today.
I understand detached warehouses, and I respect them.
Yeah.
But if you give me my option,
you still don't like them. All right, fair enough.
I prefer attached. I didn't say I don't like detached.
I think if you put me on the spot, I would have to go with attached, just because of the handling steps.
Yeah.
It's just, if you have the space, if you can have it attached, if it's not creating, someone else to drive an extra mile around you, then that would be my pick too.
May I go a step further?
Sure.
Also, if you're doing a detached warehouse, the question is that building yours?
Right.
If it is, awesome. You can do what you want. You can decide how many docks, the shape, the ceiling height. You can even, talk about some long-term investments. Do I put an automated warehouse in there? Whether it's automated full pallet, automated small parts, whatever. Generally, it seems like the detached warehouses, especially if they're off-site, are not yours. You're just leasing the building.
Yep.
And so you're kind of at the mercy of the original owner.
You can't do that much in there, or you already have to keep the end of lease in mind or things like that. Yeah. As a kind of last topic on this, let's talk a little bit about automation. You already mentioned it, automatic small parts warehouse, automatic full pallet warehouse. The topic of innovation has been picking up, I would say, especially in the last 2 years with, everyone knows that rising labor costs, qualification issues, things like that. So also here in the southeast of the US, companies are more and more looking towards automation. What impact does that have to your factory?
Automation oftentimes is a very rigid investment. So if we're talking an automated warehouse, you don't want to move it again.
No.
So you have to keep in mind, where am I going to put this? I do want to use it. It will save me money, but it will be a monument from here on.
Yeah, we call it a monument. You can't, when I heard this the first time, I'm like, huh? A monument? Like, what are we talking about?
It's not like we're praising it.
Right. There's not a swings on it or anything. It's just something that's very, very hard or very expensive to move. Give me just an idea for the audience, maybe someone who has never worked with it. What are we talking about in regards of investor? Automatic small parts warehouse, automotive, 40 jobs an hour. Can you give us a rough number of what we're talking about here?
40 jobs an hour. Let's say you need to store 20,000 boxes. I don't think that's unreasonable. You might even need to store more depending on how everything looks, but going with 20,000 boxes stored, we're talking about...
A range is also okay.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe 4 or 5 million is kind of my starting ballpark for that invest.
So definitely multiple million, and everyone who has dealt with, invest sheets when it comes to logistics equipment, there's not so many big ticket items on there. Sure, you have your tuggers and your AGVs and your forklifts and your racking, but if you want to put 5 to 10 million into an automatic solution, that's that's by far going to be your largest item. So that's got to be in the right spot. You have to have certainty that you're going to need it for at least 5 years. Yeah, knowing that you need it for 1 year, your business case is not going to hold up to that. But so let's say, someone says, I want this, I need this, this makes sense. How is that impacting your factory? Maybe not necessarily in regards of shape, but maybe the structural things around it.
So generally, an automated warehouse is better going vertical, being taller. So you've got, say, a 30-foot building. You could put an automated warehouse in something like that. It does better when we're talking much higher.
Right.
50 feet, 60 feet, up to 100 feet.
Yep.
Anything like that. You likely need to talk about the integrity of the floor, the floor strength.
Yep.
And make sure that you can actually put this automated solution there, especially at a much higher vertical height. There's also an option when we're talking this early in factory planning. You could actually avoid having building columns in that area. And it's called a rack supported structure.
Yep.
So your automated warehouse supports the building, not the reverse.
Right.
Yeah.
So the decision if you want to use automation or not impacts basically your construction, how the architects designs it. And that's typically the first thing. Yeah, you see always on LinkedIn, today we did groundbreaking. And then probably 3 weeks after that, it's going to be relevant if you need automation or not.
Yes.
And if you just put in a standard building, standard height, standard flow, standard structure, and then later you want to put in automation, then you have to deal with maybe unlevel surfaces, columns in the way. Your building is just standard 30 foot, which is not really in favor. Right. Do you change it? Probably not. So then, someone just says, yeah, just make it work. And then because you can't go high, because you have to do adjustments, then the business case gets usually shaky. So once again, before you start doing anything, you kind of have to have clarity on that topic. And once again, something you can figure out with very little information, where benchmarking data helps you to get an idea. Okay, at that volume, you're too low. Yeah, the automation is in that realm. There's 3 competitors or 3 other companies. None of them have automation. So why do you think it makes sense for you? Right. Or then maybe in a higher volume environment, you see, all right, everyone is using it. So you might want to look at that too and keep some extra budget or some extra space for it. Good. Then we'll move on to the next section. We talked a lot about potential pitfalls, what can be done wrong. You're not sure about things, you're not considering it fully. How do we approach, generally speaking, on the phase level factory planning projects? And I know that I'm supposed to answer that question a little bit, but maybe you can start with just a general phase, and I'll talk a little bit about examples and about kind of what we observe in these phases.
So we've got, I'll say, 4 main points. We've got to know what your general premises, your general strategy is, and be able to work with that. We need to know what the real layout is, but at the same time, we are creating an ideal layout. And we are also wanting to work on a cost-benefit analysis, which I believe that's something that you know very well.
Right. So those were, Brian just kind of mentioned 4 bullet points, which is kind of, if you look at it at a phase approach, 1, 2, 3, 4, you do it basically in that order. You start with premises strategy. So there's, for example, what do you want? Do you want state of the art, everything technologically advanced? Do you want low cost? What's your mix of invest and then later down the road operational costs? What's your growth strategy, 5-year outlook, things like that. So that's defined, that's the baseline. Sometimes that requires a couple sessions, a couple workshops where that actually needs to be documented. What about this? What about that? We use for this a checklist because we've done this. So when we send this checklist, we're like, I don't know. So then we start talking about this. And then once that checklist is filled out, we have a pretty good idea now of what we're trying to do here, right? Then next step is ideal layout. What's an ideal layout? So you remove every restrictions. For me, if I can make an example here, this is for me like going on vacation, right? You're at work, and usually you're at work and you have to deal with a lot of stuff, sometimes problems, conflicts, things like that. So working in an ideal layout is like going on vacation. No more stuff, no more restrictions, no more problems. And so ideal layout is you act like you just have a green field and you lay out your production, maybe your body shop, your logistics, your finished goods. We often take pieces of paper, we cut them out, we plan beforehand on, okay, roughly how large do they need to be, and then we put them on the table and tell people, okay, just do an ideal layout. Yeah, we split people up in, let's say, 2 groups, and we say, all right, everyone has an hour or 2, do as many ideal layout variants as you want. It's amazing what happens on a vacation. It's amazing when people come back and say, I have this, I have this, I have that, and we could do it like this. Just removing all of that sets people literally free. I've dealt on projects with the most, well, I'll call them small-minded. I'll call them, they're so much into their little world, into their bubble, and every time you talk to me, but what about this and what about, and we're like, no, just forget about it. And then you give them 2 hours of vacation and they come back and they're like, my goodness. So that's pure creativity. And that it's a little bit of a skill to set this free in people. I think you have to motivate them, you have to explain it, you also have to give them some space, and encourage that. And then the different groups come back and then they start competing, like, oh, our layout is this, and ours is that, and ours is much better.
Why did you do it that way?
Exactly. And then we let them kind of present it, and that's always a lot of fun. And it sounds like it's maybe, I don't want to say a joke, but it's all fun, but it's very serious and it has a huge impact. But this on purpose, this kind of vacation phase, this almost irrelevant phase that in the end doesn't matter because that's not reality, but it sets the it's basically the base for the success later. So what you do, you send people on vacation for 2 weeks, right? And then they come back and they're like, all right, sorry guys, you still got to work. You still have some restrictions, you know, your landlines, or you have fences, or you have a monument you have to deal with, again, not swings, and other stuff. But the vacation is still fresh in their mind. They still remember the cool stuff from vacation, right? So they take this and they try to make it work. It's not even that I'm doing much in there. You know, we are often just moderating a workshop, and we're just, you know, what about this? And what about that? And can you turn it? And can you flip it? And so these fresh ideas and these creative things that happened on the vacation, all of a sudden you put that now in the real world, and they're still there. So you still see the impact, and you come up with real variants. Next phase, the real layout that before that no one saw. And you know, this is kind of hard. I'm sure everyone who's still listening is like, what is he talking about? If you've never done this is probably hard to grasp and hard to understand, but it's amazing to see that happen. And then, you know, after that you have 3, 4, 5, 6 different layout variants in the real world with the restrictions that you have. And then, you know, there's personal opinions. There's maybe someone from management involved, and then there's someone who's kind of more the loudmouth. So you have, I like this is my layout. I like this is, you know, I'm the boss. So, you know, my voice has maybe more weight. And like, okay, so how do I figure out which one is now the best? So that's where we apply the cost benefit analysis. We, together with the team, define the criterias of how we wanna rate each layout. So for example, expandability, space utilization, directed material flow, ease of value stream, and a couple others. Yeah, sometimes, you know, we add things, sustainability, invest. Yep, visual approach, you know, how is the OPEX. And so each of you together with the team, again, you define your criteria. And then you give them a weight. You say, okay, this one is most important, this one is second, this one is not so important. And then again, with the team, you rate each variant. You literally put the layout on the wall and you go through, okay, team, how do you rate on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 or whatever? How do you rate this variant when it comes to expandability? And then you start thinking about, like, can I expand this? What if I want to extend my production line, my logistics? And you're like, shit, I'm, you know, already against the wall. I can't do anything. I'm landlocked. So you go through this exercise, and in the end, every variant gets ratings per criteria, and you mathematically calculate which one is the best variant.
And sometimes the best variant was not there.
What do you mean?
Sometimes you realize, oh, if I had just made a slight tweak or a slight 2 tweaks to variant number 3, that would have been the best answer.
Yes. So first thing what happens is you take personal opinion out of the equation as much as possible. And then sometimes you have 2 variants that are kind of the favorites, right? And they, you know, one on paper, one is the winner. One has a better score than the other. But you look at number 2 and like, I still like this part of it. And then sometimes what you do, you combine these 2, put it together, final variant, and then boom, you have a score 4.8 out of 5 or something like that. And then you have a room full of people who were part of this, who had ideas, their voice was heard. And, you know, a successful outcome of this would really be that you have the buy-in. You have something that feels like came from the team, and that's for me magical, because typically you go through this ideal layout, real layout, and then cost benefit analysis in 1 or 2 days. So this is again nothing that you do over 3 months. It's 1 or 2 days. You know, you get a big room at a customer and you just knock it out. Yep. All right. Yeah.
I know how exciting that topic is for you. So.
Especially at the end when you're like, okay, this is it. Is everyone cool with that? And you just look in the room and everyone's like, yep, we did this. So, and without the vacation, without the strategy definition, without talking about criterias, that typically is not possible. Okay, so maybe to summarize, what are our conclusions here from this section? That, you know, give me your top 3. What should we remember from today's session?
All right. Factory planning needs supply chain planning and logistics planning at the table at the beginning. You can't do well one without the other two.
Right.
Number two, the benchmarking. We've got a lot of benchmarking. So even if you don't have a lot of product information, before you start getting going with your factory, that's okay.
Yep.
We can work with a lack of product information.
Yep.
And number three, you can do a lot in a very short amount of time if your method is clear. You've got the ideal layout, the vacation you mentioned,
right?
Taking it to a real layout and using a cost-benefit analysis is a very time-effective solution to do that.
Yeah, I think that's 3 good points. Supply chain and logistics, don't forget about them, right? Don't forget about us.
We're important.
Right. So, that's number one, the benchmarking, the value behind it, the value about comparing KPIs and numbers and using that data to your advantage. And then, time. I mean, we all don't have a lot of time, and this doesn't take a lot of time. So a lot can be done in a short amount of time, and, implementing something then later still takes years, but the planning shouldn't be a pain or something that takes forever and too long. Good. So episode 1, I think that's a wrap. If you made it all the way till here, if someone still made it through the whole thing and still listening,
thank you.
Yep, thank you. Yep, very brave. So we're curious. Is this interesting? Is this adding value? Is this something you would like to hear again? So we're looking for some feedback. I'm not sure if you can like and subscribe and stuff like that and hit the notification, but I don't think that's possible. But like leaving us a comment or connecting with us or a thumbs up. Is a thumbs up okay on LinkedIn? I think they have a thumbs up or something like that. You can react definitely. So let us know how you like this, what's your opinion about this, and if you have any ideas on future content, like, hey, why don't you forgot to talk about this or that, and then we'll see if we can work this in. So Ryan, thank you for joining, for answering my questions. Since it was the first time, I went a little easy on you. If we do this again, we'll go on a little harder.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'll see if I can come prepared for you.
Thank you, Ryan.